Remember Basil Davison, Guy Haywood, Brother Valentine, Beverly Jones, Brian Jefferson, the others as well went down on the line. I wonder if these people gave their lives for a hopeless cause. Before their deaths, all those responsible people, the verdict is yours. But Trini have a funny way of forgetting their history to them like
Lauded for being a cultural mecca, there are now very few students at Concordia who can relate to or even know about a difficult chapter in the school's history that dates back half a century.
A display of bigotry as what took place at the cafeteria yesterday.
It all began in late January 1969. Students alleged a professor marked non-white students more harshly than whites, and that the university never took the allegations seriously. They staged an anti-racism demonstration, occupying the computer lab on the 9th floor of the Hall building.
Okay, you're going to keep it up? The demonstration? That's right. Until what time? Until our brothers come out.
In the U.S., Martin Luther King had been assassinated the year prior, and at Sir George, black students were tired of being treated as second-class citizens. The documentary 9th Floor reveals how some faculty association members spoke about black students.
They tend to laugh, immoderately perhaps. The language is very picturesque, choice, frequently obscene.
Philippe Fils-Aimé was a community activist.
That's the way it was, because it was the scientific community had put their stamp on it and say this is how blacks are inferior. Like, it took them a long time to say, well, it's not exactly that.
Racism was part and parcel of the experience living in Montreal.
Rodney John was there too, and felt this was the time to bring about change, and perhaps it could start at the university.
There were various movements, all of which addressed the question of the place of blacks in the larger society.
The protest was peaceful as student leaders negotiated with the faculty about creating a panel to address racism allegations. The black students were supported by many other groups at the university, but the talks suddenly broke down.
We were stunned, like totally destabilized. We just suddenly we see the police walk in, and we knew that was the end.
Riot police moved in to remove the protesters occupying the computer center. It got violent. 97 students were arrested, damage to the computer lab was in the millions, and Rosie Douglas was charged with mischief after police labeled him the ringleader.
Well, maybe I should just say very clearly that since we got out of jail, the Montreal police have sent our names to all different firms in Montreal, so we can't find any jobs. This means it's very difficult for us to raise funds.
Douglas spent 18 months in prison before being deported in shackles to his native Dominica. Meanwhile, the professor accused of marking black students more harshly than whites, Perry Anderson, was ultimately exonerated.
Of young people who traveled from the UWI to the capital city to voice their displeasure with the St. George Williams University in Canada. There had been a riot at the school a year prior, stemming from charges of racism leveled at a professor on the Canadian campus. Several Trinidadians were involved, and students at UWI, in solidarity, held a demonstration in 1969. 1 year later, the UWI group decided to recognize that anniversary with a protest targeting the Canadian High Commission.
in the 1970s, as though it never was, today in this century. I don't care how they try to vanish these historic memories. I will always remember the roaring 70s. Tell them to write down this one here in the pages of history. 21st of April, in the year of our Lord, 1970.
Every time I go down,
When white faces used to hold the top position. So let us all give thanks and praises to the 7th revolution. But you know this, funny, funny way of forgetting. Hey. Their history to them like it don't mean nothing. The history that went down here in the 1970s, as though it never was the day in this century. I don't care how they try to tarnish these historic memories. I will always remember the roaring 70s. Tell them to write down this one here in the pages of history. 21st of April in the year of our Lord, 1970, and out their light. Trinidad, a very funny way of forgetting. Their history to them like it don't mean nothing. The history that went down here in the 1970s, as though it never was today in this century. But don't care how they try to tarnish these historic memories. I will always remember the roaring 70s. Tell them to write down this one here in the pages of history. 21st of April in the year of our Lord, 1970.
There was also a rumor that Robinson, A&R Robinson, because he had decided to break with the PNM at that point, that he was involved in some devious plot that involved the soldiers and the Black Poor people.
The first responsibility that devolves upon you is the protection and promotion of your democracy.
With what we did at that point.
Looking back on that era, I see changes that took place politically. Who left this party to form that party, and who embezzled the oil money? Some conscious black men and women, the system made them crumble and bend. And now the nation gone right back to Europe on a western trend. Trinidad, a very funny way of forgetting. Their history to them like it don't mean nothing. The history that went down in the 1970s, as though it never was today in this century. I don't care how they try to tarnish these historic memories. I will always remember the roaring 70s. Tell them to write down this one here in the pages of history. 21st of April in the year of our Lord, 1970. Remember Basil Davis and Guy Hayward, Brother Valentine, Beverly Jones, Brian Jeffers, and the others whose rights went down on the line. I wonder if these people gave their lives for a hopeless cause. And for their deaths, all those responsible people, the verdict is yours. But Trinidad, a funny, funny way of forgetting. Their history to them like it don't mean nothing. The history that went down here in the 1970s, as though it I don't care how they try to these historic memories. I will always remember the roaring 70s. Their history to them like it don't mean nothing. The history that went down here in the 1970s, as though it never was today in this century. I don't care how they try to tarnish these historic memories. I will always remember the roaring 70s. Tell them to write down this one here in the pages of history. 21st of April in the year of our Lord, 1970, and out their light. Trinidad, a very funny way of forgetting. Their history to them like it to be nothing. The history that went down here in the 1970s, as though it never was today in this century. But don't care how they try to tarnish these historic memories, I will always remember the roaring 70s. Tell them to write down this one here in the pages of history. 21st of April, the year of our Lord, 1970.
There was also a rumor that Robinson, A&R Robinson, because he had decided to break with the PNM at that point, that he was involved in some devious plot that involved the soldiers and the Black Power people. I don't know if he had any discussion with the Black Power boys.
The call was made for the Trinity to go to sea, and I took the ship about 300 yards off, and then the convoy started to come down the hill. We had put, because we knew what was going on, we had put a bus across the roadway to stop any convoy going out, and then a lot of rubble and stuff to stop vehicles from passing.
It was easily shoved aside, by which time the Trinity had gone back out. The Colon Bay was at Staubles Bay, right sitting virtually a couple hundred meters below us. We were at the top of the hill in the crow's nest area, and the Coast Guard was firing away, hitting either below or above us.
We were shouting and trying to say who's in charge there. You cannot proceed.
It never was today in this century. But don't care how they try to tarnish these historic memories, I will always remember the roaring 70s. Tell them to write down this one here. Remember Basil Davis and Guy Haywood and Brother Valentine, Beverly Jones, Brian Jeffers and the others whose rights went down on the line. I wonder if these people gave their lives for a hopeless cause. Before their deaths, all those responsible people, the verdict is yours. But Trini have a funny way of forgetting their history to them like to mean nothing. The history that went down here in the 1970s, as though it never was today in this century. But don't care how they try to tarnish these historic memories, I will always remember the roaring 70s. Tell them to write down this one here in the pages of history. 21st of April, in the year of our Lord, 1970.
Every time I go down,
when white faces used to hold the top position, so let us all give thanks and praises to the 7th revolution. In the 1970s, as though it never was today in this century. But don't care how they try to tarnish.
As a private gentleman, smaller than the Brave, he has a length of just over 870.
Tell them to write down this one here in the pages of history. 21st of April, in the year of our Lord, 1970. And out their light.
Jesus! Stay still!
The history that went down here in the 1970s, as though it never was today in this century. But don't care how they try to tarnish these historic memories, I will always remember the roaring 70s. Tell them to write down this one here in the pages of history. 21st of April, in the year of our Lord, 1970.
There was also a rumor that Robinson, A&R Robinson, because he had decided to break with the PNM at that point, that he was involved in some devious plot that involved the soldiers and the Black Power people. I don't know if he had any discussion with the Black Power boys. He has denied it, but I can tell you for a fact he had nothing to do with what we did at Tetron.
Looking back on that era, I see changes that took place politically. Who left this party to form that party, and who embezzled the oil money? Some conscious black men and women, the system made them crumble and bend. And now the nation gone right back to Europe on a western trend. Trinidad, a very funny way of forgetting their history to them, like it told me nothing. The history that went down here in the 1970s, as though it never was today in this century. But don't care how they try to tarnish these historic memories, I will always remember the roaring 70s.
Yo, yo! These are the biggest collab. Gang, 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 gang. Boom! When we touch down, they won't play shell long.